Okay, welcome to, I'm starting to feel like this is the second set of the day. If you're at the orientation, welcome back. If you're here just for this afternoon, glad you could be here. And today we're going to look at the embellished number 1 and embellished number 2 for Key to the Highway. So I put a link into the thread on the chat. So if you're not, so two things. One, if you're watching on the Fingerstyle 5 website, make sure to click inside the video window on Watch in YouTube so you can be part of the chat if you're watching live. And even if you're watching on replay, you can always, if you want to see what was going on in the chat, what questions people were asking, that's a good way to do it too. Second, in the chat window, I posted near the top a link. There's a version 1.1 of today's of the PDF for this month. I updated it. I just cleaned up a little bit of the notation and fixed up some of the chord names in the vamp and stuff like that. So little stuff, but that's what's going on. Nice to see a lot of familiar folks, lots of new folks. Oh look, Johnny and Bruce, longtime members, checking in, and Blake and Joel and Mike. Hey, Carol's back. Excellent. All right, David Wagner. Good to see you all, and nice to see so many new folks. And I see there is a burgeoning contingent of, I'm going to say this right, in Southampton. Is that how you say it? Which is nice to see. Hey, Mariana. All right. Well, let's get rolling. And let me pull up the PDF. So here's the embellished number 1. So last week with the fundamental, tried to keep the rhythms as straightforward as possible. All eighth notes, no hammer-ons, slides, pull-offs, nothing like that. So this week, with the first embellished, we're going to add in some slides and we're going to add in some triplets, so some syncopation, right? So here's what the embellished number 1 sounds like. So if you've done the fundamental, we're basically now just kind of starting to dress up the fundamental. We're not really changing that much, but just for instance, at the beginning, we're going to slide into those 2 sixths, right? So instead of just playing right at the 4th fret, we're going to start at the 3rd fret and slide up to the 4th fret. Right, that's what's going on here. And then we're going to do it again when we get to the downbeat, the first measure. Now the thing about those slides is they are an articulation. They're like the sound of getting to these notes. It's not like 2 completely separate notes. Right, we really just want the sound of sort of crushing into those notes. So rhythmically, it should feel the same, basically. As opposed to, that's what you want to work from, to where it's just one smooth motion. So that you're coloring those notes with the sound of that quick slide. But rhythmically, it shouldn't really change what's going on. 2, 3. going to have that again on the third beat. And here we're going to have our first syncopation. So instead of just playing 8 notes, so on beat 4, having 4 and 1 and, when we're here, we're going to actually add in a little chromatic move. Chromatic just meaning moving by half step, right? So instead of just playing, so the melody goes like that, all in whole step moves, 2 fret moves, we're gonna have, which is just a way of dressing up the melody a little bit, to the highway. So instead of just singing it as, I got the key to the highway, now it's to the highway, which is a little groovier. And the triplet also makes it work. So it's 1 and 2 and 3 and to the 4 and 1 and. So this measure is not really changing, but the end of this measure is. And what makes it a little more guitaristic is to basically not, if you tried to, sometimes if you try to harmonize everything, it sounds too blocky. That would sound weird, right? It's too literal, right? This is more like a way of playing it a little more musically, a little more lilt. So you're going to harmonize here, play the open high string, play this harmony, and then land here, and then play this note as a single note. So that's what's happening right here. So 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and over the bass, just a pinch on the first one. The rest is just your fingers. So pinch, open, double stop, and then a pinch when we get to the next downbeat. DSG says, the chromatic move drove me nuts this week. Tell me more about if it was tricky rhythmically to get it right or if it was just tricky over here. I'm kind of curious because I can maybe try to suggest some things to smooth it out. I don't know. I might be able to if I know what the sticking point was. Okay, so now we've got more triplet stuff going on over here. So here, instead of fundamental, right? 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and now that's all 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, and that's like all just like right on the beat. So here we've got triplets. So when I'll continue this pass through just laying out everything that's here, and then I will try and we'll go over these triplet exercises at the bottom of the page, and I'll try to explain a little bit more about how to work on the triplets to kind of answer this question that that we have about just sort of getting the chromatic stuff to work rhythmically. Okay. Today's coffee cup, by the way, is my Seattle coffee cup. I've swapped in the New York one. I swapped out the New York one temporarily for this one from Fiore, which is in on Queen Anne Hill, or whatever they call that neighborhood. Maybe they just call it Queen Anne in Seattle, but just a shout out to my brand new favorite mug. Okay, so now we have this triplet feel thing here. So and we also have some slides. So we're sliding in. So 1 and 2 and again, not all the notes are harmonized, right? 1 and so this one is, and again, the notes that are kind of in between the strong beats. Now I know this isn't like literally on the strong beat, but it's the first beat, it's the first note we're playing of the melody. So it's so the notes that are played single note are kind of a little more parenthetical. The ones played with the double stops are a little more emphasized, which gives a little bit of dimension, right? It's not just and when you're sliding also, it gives it a little bit of back and forth so that the melody's not totally literal and it feels a little more musical. So we're sliding in single note and then right on the beat here, and then a slide into 4 and 3, and then open. And so there is a really slightly, what's happening here with the triplet feel is that we're playing on the and of 1. And again, I'm going to kind of belabor this just to explain what's going on, but if you just need to sort of do this by feel, that's okay. It's very weird in a way to take this kind of intuitive, fluid kind of way of playing a melody and literally notate it out. So I don't want you to spend too much time getting hung up on the specific rhythms. As long as you can get the notes and you can nail the moments when you're pinching, the nuances of how this is sort of splayed out rhythmically are not as important as just making sure that you've got your thumb steady and that you're hammering this one and this one, or playing this one and this one right where it belongs. So that said, what's happening here is we're playing the and of 1, 1, and 2, and So this is a very kind of peculiar thing. It's a triplet, right, which is 3 eighth notes, right? So this is 1 and 2 and 2 and And so this is falling on the 2 and So, and this is held over, right? So you feel this 1 and 2 and sorry, no double stop. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. So just take it slowly. When played without counting and thinking about it, it has this nice kind of thing going back and forth. And if you want to just get it by feel, that's okay too. But that's where the triplet action and the slide action happens in that measure. And then here we're back to single note stuff for a little bit. Here we're going to slide into this double stop. And so here again, we've got another triplet on beat 3. So 1, 2, 3, and now you could also hold down the ring finger here and roll back along the top 3 strings. Root, flat 7, 5. And then this is not any different, except we have a hammer on here. And then we have some triplets on the turnaround. So 1 and 2 and 3, 4 and 1, 2 and, right? So it makes a big difference. Just going from the fundamental to the embellished 1 is a pretty significant change. Embellished, I mean, fundamental 1, the fundamental stands on its own, but the embellished does add in the slides and the triplets that make it feel a little more fluid. So here's the fundamental. Embellished number 1. Now, again, these embellishments are embellishments. You don't have to do all of them. You can basically add any of these into the fundamental and leave out anything that feels weird. So if this measure is giving you fits, just play it like the fundamental. Maybe slide in here, but don't worry about this funny triplet rhythm. Same thing, if you want to just start by just doing the slides. Or just start by putting in the triplets. Then that's an option too. All right, let me answer a couple questions and then we'll get to some of these exercises. Okay. Am I muting the bass or plucking the bass and then muting? I'm muting the bass. I got this part of my hand resting right where the string meets the bridge. So I'm not muting it after the fact with my thumb. I'm doing this palm muting so that the notes from the get-go have a lot faster decay. So palm muting there. Good question. Tony, in the last measure, why the G bass on the C7 chord sounds weird to me? Okay, let's see. Well, the full chord would be like that with the 5th and the 3rd and the flat 7 and the 9. And then down to B7. It's to make the chord sound fuller by putting a lower note in, which is the 5th, and a lot of times when you hear people playing these as dance band chords, that's the kind of the standard formulation. So I'm kind of in the habit of putting the 5th in the bass because it sounds fuller to me, but you can just play it with a C and a B in the bass. If that sounds more natural to you, that's totally fine. You know, those things, like that kind of voicing, like, doesn't always sound totally natural at first. It's very much an idiomatic or stylistic thing. Like when I was first learning to finger pick and I heard people putting the G in the bass on every other, on like beat 3 for a C chord, I thought that sounded bizarre and I couldn't get with it. And I just played my C like this for a long time until like at some point it just started to make more sense sonically to me. So it's like, you can do it either way. I feel like there was another question. Okay, from Daniel. Sometimes I ask myself, is the fundamental really enough in an arrangement and then go to the embellished musically? I hope so. I mean, I try to make it as musical as possible while keeping it rhythmically. And in terms of the two things I try to dial back in the fundamental are I try to keep it rhythmically just limited to quarter notes and eighth notes, and not a lot of syncopation, a lot of triplets and that kind of thing. And then I also try to keep out any really elaborate. I try to keep the articulations to a minimum. By articulations, I mean hammer-ons, pull-offs, slides, that kind of thing. So that means you have to really rely on your touch and the dynamics. I think you can make it sound pretty good. In fact, it's kind of an exercise in dynamics and control and stuff to see if you can make something that's fairly sparse sound really musical. And of course, it will really set up your embellished version because it'll be like, whoa, all this new stuff is happening now. This is great. A couple more questions, and then I will get on to the exercises. I feel the fundamental, this is also from Daniel, I feel the fundamental is often important to understand the tune and its structure. That is the idea. I mean, I often will refer to the fundamental as the bones of the song, right? I do it first and call it the fundamental because if you can play the fundamental, then you understand what you're doing when you embellish the tune. If I just walked in and said, let's all learn embellish number 3, it'd be like a lot of, oh my God, like there's so much happening right here. I want you to see it as a development from the fundamental into these more elaborate versions. And in fact, I've started doing more iterations of the embellished, like embellished 1 and 2 or embellished 1, 2, and 3, so that you can see elements added in one by one. Like this one doesn't have any chords, but embellished number 3 does. So in a minute, we'll move on to embellished number 2, which will start to add some bass motion in. But that's the only real thing that it adds. But adding in bass motion is a big step in terms of coordination and just the concept. So yeah. Okay, here's a more of a gear question, but I'll just drop this one in right now from Marco. To what extent does string gauge and tension affect the ability to get muted notes more present? That I don't know. I will often point out, I do play a short scale guitar, which has a springier feel to me. And actually I got to prove this to myself because I went to Austin Vintage Guitars, which is here in Austin, obviously, earlier this week, and played a couple of, played an advanced jumbo, like recent, like, you know, like Gibson reissue stuff, an advanced jumbo and a J35. And the advanced jumbo, and I was like, boy, the advanced jumbo, it's really loud. It really speaks, you know, but it's hard to play. It's kind of tight. I was like, that's weird because it's basically a J45. And Steve, who runs the place, was like, oh, well, the advanced jumbo, that's what they called it when they did a long scale, like more like a dreadnought or an OM. I was like, oh, okay, that's why it felt tight to me. And then I picked up the J35, and it has this wide neck, and it's got a shorter scale. And it's like, oh, yeah, that feels like the kind of guitar I would play. But I don't think scale length or string tension or any of that has anything to do with how your palm muting sounds. I think it should be all the same, basically. I mean, more or less. Okay. Oh, and here's a comment from Blake. I like the counterplay of the fundamental to the full embellished version in the arrangement. I often close with the fundamental again because of its purity. Yeah, I try to remember to do that too, to come back. I often forget. But it's kind of nice to, like, it gives it a nice symmetry to come back to something simple. Okay. Let's talk about these exercises, and I'll try to explain a little bit about the triplet feel. So this first exercise is a slides exercise. And so I've just taken some sixths and this whole idea of playing a pair of notes and then single notes, right? So this is just a one measure exercise. That's what this double bar means, just stop when you get to here. This is the one exercise right here. So if you're working on a technique like a slide and it only comes up every couple of bars, when you play through the tune, you're gonna run into it, it's gonna be puzzling, and then you're gonna be on to the next thing. So this exercise is an example of how to take the thing that's tricky and really focus on it. So just get a bunch of slides going in one measure in different situations. Like here we're playing it on the offbeat, here we're playing it as a pinch, here we're playing an open string, and then here's a downbeat again with more single notes following it. So just different situations that you're going to run into. So it's just a good way to practice a bunch of that at once. And now here is a way to work on the triplet feel, which again, what a triplet represents is this idea of 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and so here's nothing but triplets all in one measure. And I would probably play like just a measure of E in between. And again, you're kind of rocking here between E and B. So playing an E chord, and then a B chord, and then an E chord, a B chord, 2, 3, 4. So just practicing that timing, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1, 2, that last E and that bass are not written out in the example, but basically when you get to the end of the measure here, for the next imaginary measure, just to give yourself some breathing room, just play a pinch on the downbeat, 6-string, high string, and then 3 more bass notes. So. You could try to put the whole thing together, but it's a tricky transition. Do that and you count 1 and a 2 and a 3 and a 4 and a 1, 2 and a 3 and a 4 and a. It should help to get that rhythm into your head. And then practicing some slides, whoops, up here on the with the A bass, and then these moves up here. So we've got just 4 beats of A, and on top we've got 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. So just getting into the different intervals we need to play over the A chord. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and then some triplets. So one, again, we're coming in here on the and, so 1 and 1 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, like that. So again, trying to practice using the material that you're going to need, which is these 6, with the rhythm you're going to need, which is the triplets. So just getting in there and focusing on that, although you can just work on the tune, but if you want to sort of break down and isolate some of these moves, I think these exercises will help. Okay, moving on. Let's look at embellished number 2. Now what we're going to be doing here mostly is adding in bass notes. So if you look at the melody, it's all the same as before, as embellished number 1, just the slides and the triplets. But there's some bass notes added in. So here we're going to walk up 1, 2, 3, 4. And then here we're going to rock from B down to F sharp and G sharp. And then we're going to sit on A, 2 beats, go to the low E. I'm going to explain why we're doing this in a minute. Then we're going to walk up to B. And then again, next line, we're going to walk from the root to the 3rd and the 4th and the root, and then the 5th and the root of B, and then into the turnaround. Now there's kind of a logic to what's going on here, which is the first 2 beats, we're always going to just play the root of the chord. And then on the 3rd and 4th beats, we're going to go first to another chord tone in the same chord, and then some note that works as a passing tone to get us from the chord tone we're on to the bass note we want to go to the root for the next chord. So easier to just illustrate. Here we're on E for 2 beats. Then we go on beat 3. We go to the 3rd of E. That's a chord tone. And then we go to this A. That's a passing tone. It's in between the 3rd of E and the root of B. So there's a reason why we're doing this. We're playing E to establish that we're on an E. We're playing a different chord tone of E to move somewhere. And then we're playing a passing tone on our way to this new root. We play this root twice. We go to another chord tone of B. We go to the 5th in this case. So root, root, 5th, And then this is a passing tone to get us to A. And all a passing tone is a note that's in the key that you're in that can connect you to the note you're coming from and the note you're going to. That's all it really means. And you can have a passing tone that's in the scale. You can have a chromatic passing tone, different kinds. But here we've got basically two beats on the root, going to a different chord tone in the same chord, and then a passing tone. Now here's A. We play that twice, and then we go to its fifth. So another chord tone, a chord tone for the key of A, but not the root. And here we're just going to stay twice on that note. Here we're back on A for 2 beats, following our rule of 2 beats on the chord that we're on. Here's a chromatic passing tone. We're going to B. We're imagining that we're going to play a quick B7 here to take us back to E. Whoops. Hey, come back. So for this whole first line then, we have E, chord tone, passing tone, B, chord tone, passing tone, A, chord tone, repeated, A, passing tone, root, back to E. In the second line, we're going to have E twice, chord tone, passing tone, root of B, fifth of B, another chord tone, root, and then into the turnaround. And all we're doing is putting that underneath the embellished number 1 melody, and that's what makes up embellished number 2. It's the embellished number 1 melody, slides and triplets, with new bass lines added in. So it sounds like this. And as much as possible, the bass is moving when the melody's at rest. Not always. It's moving there when the melody's at rest, and then here we're playing over an open string. And then here the melody's at rest, so we can play this walk up. And then here, we play a simplified bass line because there's too much going on in the melody. And here's an empty spot, so here comes the bass. We got to just kind of make it work with this one melody note. Here we are doing a few things at once. And then all right. So that's the embellished number 2, and that's plenty to work on. Let me just go over these bass run exercises because these will kind of isolate the bass moves while giving you something else to work on. Because the thing is, like, you can just work on the bass. So like if you look at this one and you just do the bass, you're doing root 3, 4, root of B, 5th, and 6th of B, right? But in real life, once you've learned the bass, you've got to be able to do the bass while something else is happening on top. So this exercise gives you something simple to do on top, which is just repeat a note. Right, so a double stop on the downbeat, so a pinch, thumb, index, and ring. So a pinch and then a note on top, pinch and then a note on top. Go to the new bass note, do another pinch, new bass note, do another pinch, double stop on the downbeat of B7, index, middle, thumb, index, ring. So just a way to isolate that bass motion coordinated with notes on top, basically. And then same idea here on that on the A chord, where we're just going to go from A to its fifth, and then come back, and then walk up to the B, and at the same time on top have a pinch. Sorry. So just an exercise in finding those bass notes while you keep stuff going on top. Okay, that's basically today's material, but I see some questions and I am happy to answer them. So let's see what we got. Delphine, hello. The two beats on the root, walking on the third and the fourth, is it a personal choice, which sounds very nice, or a kind of usual rule for arranging a walking bass? Ooh, that's a good question. I can't say that I can't sort of say chapter and verse like, oh, and I got it from so-and-so when they did X, Y, Z. It's more that I was looking for a way to start adding in bass motion without making it too overwhelming. So there's really this is kind of a combination of two different kinds of ways of thinking about bass. There is the swing era walking bass, which is basically 2 notes per chord. And you hear that on Count Basie records or, Benny Goodman or that kind of thing. And then there's the walking bass, which is, there's walking bass in the swing era, but like the bebop period is more like, the idea is you have a different note on every beat. So this is kind of a combination of, if I did it just more in that swing way with like 2 notes, changing every 2 notes. Right? And if I did it with more of a bebop walking bass. I'd be in trouble here, right? Because it's... blah, 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 right? So this is kind of splitting the difference. It's like, well, we're going to sit on here for 2 beats, then we're going to walk up to the next place. It just seemed to make sense to me musically to like basically play a steady bass, but then have some motion into the next chord. So it was just an idea, and I was like, well, let me try it out. And it just seemed to work really well and be really musical. So it's one of those things where I think I was doing it intuitively in my own playing, but like using sort of the gaps in the melody to do a little more motion. And then for this arrangement, I was like, well, let's see how specific you can be about it. And I just kind of made that the rule for the arrangement, and it worked out, it seemed pretty satisfying. So I just kind of went with it. So now that I'm thinking like, yeah, that's probably a good way to think about it. So I hope that's a satisfying enough answer. More comments. Let's see. Are you playing some of the triplets as a roll? This is John's question. The triplets as a roll. Let's see. I am kind of, let's see. So I pointed out you could do this measure here. I mean, I did it as discrete notes on the B string, so that when you're walking up, I wanted that B string to ring out as you go for these bass notes. But you could roll like that, but then you lose the B as you go into the A bass note. So other than that, I mean, I guess I'm doing a little bit of that roll on some of the triplets, some of the double stops. So they're staggered a little bit, as opposed to just joink like that. As opposed to, but if I'm sliding, then I'm not. So it's a little bit, there's a couple different ways you could do it. I'm not sure that answers your question, so let me know. Oh, Eric, could you go over the left-hand finger on the last two measures, please? Oh, sure, like for this big turnaround thing? Yeah, why not? Okay, here's what I'm doing in the moment. Let's see. I'm doing middle, ring, index for that E7 over G sharp. And then I don't usually do this, but it works well here. Sliding back to the index finger and then using my pinky on top for the A7. So like that. And then bringing my pinky down and bringing the index over for the bass. And then pinky also getting the C sharp here, second fret on the B string. And then let's see. Middle finger for the bass of the B chord, and then middle finger going over to the G, ring and pinky coming in for the C7, or really a C9 chord, and a B7 chord. And then here, that means the ring finger can slide up, and it's in position, put in the pinky, and you're ready to go around again. So. Okay, Nigel, hey Nigel, when you get an arrangement up to speed, how fast do you think is about right? Boy, that's pretty personal. I tend to play these things too fast. These tunes, they're supposed to be like sort of mid-tempo or, kind of slow blues almost. I mean, people do this tune all different ways, but I'll try to play it where it feels right to me, I guess. How fast is that? Let me pull up the old metronome app and see. Here we go. I don't know how fast I'm playing it. Let's see. That's 74. That actually feels a little fast. I mean, I could see doing it. That's 63. Yeah, I mean, there's a spread, 60, 70, 75, somewhere in there. Yes, Marco, I have been, when I went back and looked at some of the live streams, I was playing Big Surly way too fast. I mean, it shouldn't be like, and in fact, I'm relearning, I don't know if it's I don't know who wrote it. It's on a Stefan Grossman and John Renborn record this tune called Snap a Little Owl, this walking bass line. And I'm relearning it because I figured it out at one point, and the B and the C section, I always forget. So I went back to relearn it. And they play it really fast. And I was like, I think it's groovier if you slow it down a little bit. But I also don't want it to be like, what, you can't play it at tempo? So I'm trying to figure out the right place to play that. Okay, Delphine, follow-up question about last week, answering a question about the turnaround chords progression. You demonstrated it was E, A7, C7, B7, C7, B7, C7 tritone sub of F sharp, clear enough, but I'm confused. Why did you write the first C as being an A sharp diminished, which it also is? Yeah, okay. Was this for the vamp, or was this? I want to answer this correctly. I did notice that. Okay, it is an E, and then an A7. Oh, right. Okay, so I remember afterwards, after the live stream, thinking, oh, that wasn't really quite right. So it depends what you have on the B string. Okay, so if you're playing like this. You have a C sharp on the along with the, so a lick like that. When you have the C sharp here over this B flat in the bass, that definitely implies A sharp diminished. But if you do that, and what happened was I wasn't, I think, playing what was actually notated, and I was like, oh yeah, like, just thinking that if you end up with C natural over this B flat, that does imply a C7 chord, because you've got the fifth and the root of C, and then here's the flat 7 of C. At this point, A sharp diminished is nowhere in sight, because you need a C sharp to get that sound. And this sound is the sound of a C with the flat 7 in the bass. So that was kind of my goof, and good for you for catching it. Let me know if that makes sense. Abraham, yes, very true. The pace you walk on a dusty road on a hot day when you're not in any particular hurry. Oh, good. Glad that makes sense. And let's see. I think that's all the questions. Just going to skip up through. Okay, we talked about tempo. We talked about the left-hand fingering. John, I hope I answered your question about the triplets. Oh, good. Joel, glad you thought that helped with the bass line. I think this is everything. Daniel, I think I got your questions down. Blake, those were comments. Watson, we talked about the plucking the bass. We talked about the triplets. DSG, let me know if I got you squared away on the transition. Let's see. Hey, Valerie, how are you doing? Oh, the guys from Southampton are chatting it up. Okay, I think that's everything. So that's what we got this week. Next week, we will look at Embellished number 3, which is adding in some 8th notes to the bass, and then we'll get into the vamps. So that's what's coming up. And then there's no 6 steps next week. That's the week after. But there is orientation number 3, So if you're new around here or newish and you missed the most recent orientation, we did it earlier this afternoon. It's archived now. And you can find that in the foundations section of the website. And I went into more detail about how to find and use the live streams, using the forum, and using the PDF. Just a little more detail about all that stuff. So if you want to check out any of that, those orientation streams are going to stay archived over on the Foundations page. All right, I think that's everything. Yeah, we'll meet next week and finish up Key to the Highway, and then we'll have a week off, and then we'll get into improvising, and we'll go over a bunch of stuff for soloing on the same song, which will be super fun. All right, everybody.